UK inflation data has just come out, and we're going to take a look at what that means for the Bank of England and also sterling. And today's trading takeout is going to be how to become uncaring about losses. What kind of process can you go through to achieve this? But before we get into things, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want me to pop up in your YouTube feed every day for the best market news, commentary, and to maintain your trading edge. Yep, so the news out at 7 a.m. was that UK core CPI year on year was 5.1% versus the expected 4.9%, with the previous being 5.1% as well. RPI up just slightly versus expectations, 5.2% versus the expected rate of 5.1%, with the previous at 5.3%. But clearly, it's the month-on-month number that was doing some of the heavy lifting, 0.4% versus expected 0.2%. Now, where does this leave Andrew Bailey and the Bank of England? Well, it's likely going to reinforce some hawkishness there. It's going to mean that maybe interest rates are in fact required to stay higher for longer. And we can see this represented by how the pound has reacted just this morning. So if I go over to a cable chart, you can see that from 7 a.m. we've rallied so far about 50 ticks. So that's clearly showing the hawkish bias, showing a preference for an increase in interest rates based off of this. Now, there are some caveats here, though, I feel. So what we saw just yesterday was the UK wage growth data, and that actually missed expectations. So the Bank of England has been going on this sort of phrasing of there being a wage price spiral or the potential for a wage price spiral. But looking at the inflation data of wages, it's not really suggesting that. It's not suggesting that wages are a core component here. So I haven't had enough of a minute yet just to break down what the core components are. But from my guess, I would argue that coming into winter, Christmas, is probably quite a big pressure there. I'd say that there's likely going to be some caveats in this inflation data. And I think what I'll do is tomorrow I will update you with those caveats. But if we take a bit of a broader look at the pound and how we're reacting, we're back above yesterday's high. Yesterday's evening's high. We're above the Asian range here. So there is, some support to be found here on a shorter term basis. Now, where are the targets intraday? Relatively simple to look for. Here's a range there. So you're probably looking at up above 1.269 as a target intraday, but looking to bounce between those ranges. And of course, it matters about where we are headed with other data as well. If I just take a brief look at what is coming out. So we've got 10 a.m. EU data too. So we've got European data, and we're looking at HICP, which is the relative equivalent, I guess. There are some discrepancies between UK CPI and HICP, but we can consider them to be, a kind of parity. They're very similar data points. Now, if you were to be wanting to look at a trade there, obviously euro sterling would be the one to focus on. So if we head back to euro sterling, we're already seeing a swift decline in the pair, and we have actually seen a decline since the end of November, which is very interesting for this pair, considering it loves a mean reversion. It's one of the most painful trades ever. If you look at it for the last, 8 years, it's just been an absolute chop fest on the longer time frames. But we could be entering into a world where if inflation does indeed maintain some sort of divergence between the UK and Europe, we could start seeing euro pound really start to drop to lower levels not seen since, perhaps, if we want to really go and tackle this, levels not seen since maybe 2015. these could be the kind of places which we're looking at, but that's a long way off in my view. And it would depend on how badly the Eurozone does between now and maybe 2025, end of 2025. So that's a long way off, but it's always good to keep these key themes in your head just so that you know where a longer term direction might be, so you can then fit day-to-day trading in there. Now, back onto Euro Pound, actually, this is quite interesting to back up what I'm suggesting there. Note all of these sort of big wicks. I mean, what is that suggesting? It's suggesting that parity is almost certainly off the cards, in my view. We've tried over 8 years to tick really high, and each time it's just absolutely got clattered again. And so this is quite an interesting key point if you consider all of this sort of space here as well. Why are so many people wanting to sell up here? And what does that mean for their overall view of the structure of the Eurozone, of the currency? In my view, it means that there should really be reasons sought for the currency pair to move down here, whether that's Euro side or pound side. It's largely irrelevant. I would say it's more Euro side if we're looking at a structural difference there. You've got 18 nations that are part of the euro. You can't have singular monetary policy across all of those. It just doesn't work. So the structural issues will become more apparent. We always say that. It doesn't mean that the Eurozone is going to go away. It just means that they're going to have to keep redoing and reassessing exactly what they're doing at each stage. So longer term issues are that this kind of vacuum, if you like, gets filled. But for now, we're going to see how the market digests the UK inflation data. And I'll be back tomorrow with any caveats that I might see in that data, and I'll let you guys know. We're going to go for a little bit of a different take on the Trading Takeout today. And it's not going to be directly trading related, but it's going to be something that can definitely help you with your trading. And the one thing that I think is really necessary is to really become uncaring about losses, but also, funnily enough, about wins. And the way you can do that is by understanding and studying an old Greek philosophy, Greek and Roman philosophy actually, called Stoicism. Now, you might have heard of this, and I think it does get bandied around quite a lot in some relatively cringe circles. You might see it online, you might see people talking about it, but there are a few different books in there that I think could really do well. Now, there's one called Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. It's fantastic. It's relatively short as well, but it basically has sort of little lessons, little meditations, I guess, within the book, and they can really sort of unlock a new way of thinking. There are other ways in which you can interpret these. I think a guy called Ryan Holiday or Halliday, I can't remember specifically, has a great book on or a series of books actually on Stoicism. The other one is the Enchiridion. It's a bit of a difficult word to pronounce and spell, but another one, I think that's by Epictetus, who was another philosopher. But effectively what they are trying to get across is that the only thing that you can control are your own actions. You can't control anything external apart from your own thoughts and actions. And this is a bit of a strange one, everyone is going to die one day. And so what this means is that you remember death, you recount death, and then that makes things much more understandable within the present context. And it allows you to manage things better. If you get a feeling of, oh God, this is awful, well, just remember that one day you're not even going to be able to have a feeling. So that can serve you actually quite powerfully. And then I think one of the other really important things that I personally get from, having a grasp of this way of thinking is that everything's relatively fleeting. Thoughts can be fleeting, feelings can be fleeting. If you think that there's a really low point, that's actually quite fleeting in the grand scheme of things. And you can imagine how this can transfer over into trading and investing. So one of my big tips then would be to start getting to grips with, this way of thinking of Stoicism. You don't have to incorporate it into your life, but even just understanding and reading about it could unlock some really good processes in your mind.